sure that everybody in the room understands why in the world is there a sales trainer talking to a gym membership, right? Like we gotta definitely make that connection, right? And to be honest, we struggled quite a bit on coming up with like the right way to describe the talk, because we're hitting on a lot of different things, and ultimately you all decide how it resonates with you, and I don't know what that's gonna be, right? So we landed on cross-train your confidence. That's a piece of what we're gonna talk about, but really the goal is for me to share with you the psychological framework that we teach high-performing salespeople. So to give you a little bit of background, what I do for a living is I am a salesperson. I am 100% commission, and I also train salespeople. So companies hire me and our company to train their sales teams. Typically, the people who hire us are very well-paid sales teams, very high level of experience, very complicated enterprise level sales, lots of decision makers, long sales cycles, and that's what we do, is we coach through that sort of a dynamic, right? And the thing about sales is that, like, I have yet to meet a child who says, I want to be a salesperson. Has anybody ever, have you all heard of one? No. Doesn't happen, right? It just doesn't happen. And a lot of people who are not in sales, like when I tell them what I do, they go, oh, I could never be a salesperson, right? It's a very common sentiment. Now, I personally think it's the best job in the world. I'm a little bit biased, but it's a really tough job psychologically, and I think that's really at the root of why people shy away from it. That's why people say, I don't think I want to do that, right? Because psychologically it is a very difficult job. And so the reality is, do we teach sales techniques? Yes, of course. But where we start and where we spend a lot of our energy is taking hold of the head trash that we carry around with us about our profession, about how we're going to be perceived, about rejection, and we work to reframe it in a way that we can show up and perform. Right? So much of our work has to do with the psychology of being in the role of a seller. And if you think about it, there's the obvious part that is, this is your life in sales, right? Rejection everywhere you turn. But the other thing is that the sales team are the people who are not only responsible because they're commissioned for making sure that their family has the income that they need month after month, and quarter after quarter, but they're also responsible for bringing in the revenue that makes sure other people have jobs, that they're able to feed their families. So you pile all of that on top of the rejection, and it's a big burden. It's a big burden. Now, it's also the highest paid profession in the world, okay? But it comes with a lot of stuff that we have to work through. So what I'm going to share with you is how we work with salespeople. I'm going to give you some sales examples, but I'm going to primarily focus on what does this mean for everybody. Is anybody in here actually a salesperson? I feel like I've met you before.
I'm trying because I'm a seller.
Okay. And you're a salesperson?
Yes. Dina Flodak, national accounts.
Okay. National
Play. Florence, actually.
Florence! She sold something.
Yeah, right? Gym memberships.
Gym membership.
I have one, yes, obviously.
Yes. So a few of you actually wear a role technically of salesperson, right? But rejection and fears and head trash, my belief is that all of us have what we call head trash. It's these things that prevent us from performing at our best, things that hold us back from being fully who we could be, that are actually not true. And we all have head trash. We just all have different flavors of it, right? So where we start, and this is always surprising to people, because we sit down with a team of 30-year veterans and sales professionals, and we're like, today, lesson 1, we're going to talk about our feelings. Every time. And they're never expecting it, right? So the first concept I want to share with you is this idea of identity versus role. And my guess is that as I describe this, you've probably heard something like this before. You probably understand it intuitively, but maybe you didn't have words for it. Maybe you didn't have an actual structure to think about it in this way. So the idea is that if I start all the way at the bottom, this group, people who on an identity scale would rate themselves as a 0 to 3, we're going to call them non-winners, you could call them losers, but I'm not going to. Non-winners typically have a self-view that is externalized, meaning every time I fail, it's somebody else's fault. It's the market, right? It was COVID. It was the competitor launched something else, right? It was, my teacher sucked, right? It was somebody else's fault every time I failed. Those are our non-winners. We know people like this in our lives, right? Excuse makers are your non-winners. Then we've got the winners all the way at the top. These are people who, if we say, how do you value yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, are gonna say, I'm somewhere between a 7 and a 10. The thing about winners is that winners don't always win, but they do believe that they can win, and so they're willing to take risks so that they can see what happens if they try, right? They tend to be resilient, they tend to be willing to put themselves out there. Then we've got this middle group that we call at-leasters. Any idea, any guesses why we call them at-leasters?
At least I didn't, but it could have worked.
Could have worked, right?
At least I tried.
At least I tried. At least I did it. I met my goals last quarter, right? At least I'm better than those bozos down in the non-winner category, right? At-leasters, it is my belief that the vast majority of us actually start here, and I'll tell you why, until we begin to think about separating this out. If I were to ask you to rate yourself, don't say it out loud, just for yourself. If you were on a deserted island and all of your roles were taken away from you, meaning you're not a parent, you're not a spouse, you're not a business owner, you're not an employee, you're not a committee member, you've literally no roles of any responsibilities. So she's like, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Can we go to this island? If you just exist. Yes, if you just exist, right? How might you rate yourself on an identity side? 1 to 10. Don't say it. Do you have a number? Anybody have one in their head? Struggle with it? Something close? My guess is that if you rated yourself as anything less than a 10, and I'm sure a lot of people did, most people do when we're doing this exercise, it's because we allowed our thoughts and our memories of role performance to creep in, right? So sometimes I yell at my kids. I could be a better listener. I could be a harder worker. Sometimes I pretend like I'm not listening when my husband's talking to me, right? Whatever those things might be, we allow our role performance from the different roles that we have in our lives to creep in, and that takes us down a few notches on the identity scale, right? So my belief is that all of us, when we really start to first think about this, like how would I rate myself 0 to 10? The vast majority of us rate ourselves in this at-leaster category. And one way to think about this is that at-leasters, our identity and our role are really, really intertwined. Which means when we do well at something, when we set a goal and we hit it, or we perform really well at something, our identity and our role come up and they feel really high, right? We're feeling really, really good about ourselves. But when we're an at-leaster, and this is kind of the test here, is that when I fail at something, my identity comes down with it, right? So when I don't do as well as I thought I would, I'm starting to feel bad about myself, right? When my identity and my role are really closely intertwined, I am existing in at-leaster territory. So if you weren't sure, that's really how I would define it. We're really, really closely related. Any idea what is the problem with this?
Can't always win.
Yeah, definitely can't always win, right? And so then what? So the problem with it, let's skip ahead just a couple here, is that you can only perform in a role in a manner that is consistent with how you view yourself conceptually, right? So here's what happens with salespeople, and then you can tell me how it might fit in your lives, right? Here's what happens to salespeople. Salespeople say, I had a really good quarter. I had a really big deal come through, right? I'm feeling really good about myself. I blew my goals out of the water. And I'm feeling really good. And then this little voice comes in and says, you're good. But you're not that good, are you? Maybe you got lucky. Are you sure that you want everybody to expect this level of performance out of you going forward? Like, maybe you need to reset expectations a little bit here, right? And so what we see is maybe we'll have a really good month, a really good quarter, and then we see performance pretty predictably drop back into the comfort zone, right? And it's because of that fear, right? I don't know that I can keep this up. So, no, it's okay. If I go back to what are the definitions of people who have these different levels here? Our winners are confident, they're resilient, they're optimistic, and they're authentic. So our winners take risks because they know that if they fail, they are not a failure. They know that if they fail, it is an expression of their role and not their identity. Our non-winners are really good at making excuses, really good at being the victim. It's always somebody else or some situation's fault is the reason that I failed. And then our at-leasters, we're gonna work hard to keep up, right? But we're not gonna work particularly hard to get ahead. Because that's scary. That's a scary place to be. Because then people are going to expect it out of me. Another way that we see this play out, I can tell you that once learning this and once kind of wrapping my head around this separation and having a terminology around it, I can look back and realize there are so many situations in my life where I performed very obviously as an at-leaster. Here's one big one. When I was in middle school, high school, I was obsessed with Duke. I wanted to go to Duke. I'm from Virginia. I wanted to go to Duke. Obviously, not the easiest school to get into, right? So, time comes to apply for schools. I applied to other elite schools, no problem. I did not submit an application to Duke when it came down to it. Why?
Didn't want to touch it.
Yeah. Because my identity and my role were too intertwined, right? If I got rejected from Duke, I was a failure, right? Because everybody around me knew that I liked Duke or didn't Duke. So if I didn't get in, I was not able to handle psychologically what that meant for me and my understanding of myself, right? Applied to other elite schools, but I didn't have that identity tied in, right? So it's kind of like, I like to use the analogy of middle school dance. Does anybody remember their middle school dance? Anybody? You do? Do you mind playing along with me on this?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay? Okay. She's like, oh, okay. Okay, so if your middle school dance was anything like mine, girls were on one side and boys were on the other side of the gymnasium. Is that not right? Yep. Clear across the gymnasium. Okay, do you remember who your best friend was? What was her name? Stacy.
Yeah.
Okay. We can call him David unless you want to give a name to your crush in middle school.
He was my first boyfriend, Justin Gilliard.
Justin! Okay.
If anybody knows these people,
I'm sorry. From Greenville. So Fran and Stacy are over here with the girls, right? Justin and the boys are over there. Now let's pretend, for the sake of this, that you and Justin were not a thing yet. You were just kind of doing your middle school, like being mean to each other sometimes, figuring that out. So she's like, pretty there, yeah. So we get to the dance, and your friend Stacy says, "Fran, you still have a crush on Justin?" And we'll go ask him to dance. No, she said no. Yeah. So she's like, Stacy's like, what's the worst that could happen, right? So she talks you into it, and you walk what feels like 60 seconds across the gymnasium, and Justin's like, no, I'm good. I know that didn't happen. Let's pretend. He's like, no, I'm good. back what feels like 60 hours all the way across back to your friend, right? She's like, oh no, Justin's gonna be so sad that he said no to you, he's gonna be so jealous. So Stacy goes across the gym and asks all the boys, will you dance with my friend Fran? Will you dance with my friend Fran? Will you dance with my friend Fran? And she comes back and she's like, I got a whole list of them. You were set for the night. Here's your calling card, right? Go after it. Now, why was it so easy for Stacy to make that ask for you? Right? Right. So why do I teach people this in sales?
Could you repeat that? I didn't hear what you said.
Because it wasn't for her,
Oh,
right? So if I were to ask any of you, hey, would you call the people you know and ask them if they're interested in sales training for the people on this list? Here's a list of people. Or here's a list of people. Would you call and ask them if they'd like to sign up for Alloy, come in for a session? Now, if I ask you to do that for her, how are you feeling with anxiety?
not too bad.
Not too bad. But when I ask you to do it,
There's pressure.
right? Because you've got him asking you how it went, right? You've got revenue tied to that, you've got goals tied to that, you've got expectations tied to that, right? And so the reason that we teach this to salespeople is that the only possible way that I can show up and perform in the way that I'd like to show up is I have to completely remove my role from my identity. Otherwise, there's no possible way I can do it. Right? So we work really, really, really hard at that intentional separation. We work really hard at trying to adopt a mindset and approach of being like, if I were not me, right? If my family's dinner tonight, if the responsibility that I have for all of the families that rely on us to bring in revenue for this company were not a thing, if I was completely independently wealthy and had nothing to lose here, how would I behave? And that is how I have to show up every single time, whether or not it's true. It's not usually true. Okay. Let me pause here because I've got more for you, but any initial thoughts or comments on what we've discussed so far? It's okay if there are none. I know that didn't happen to you, by the way. He was like, I will dance with you, Fran. Dance the whole night. I was like, just so you all know. Dance the whole night.
Do you equate like self-worth with identity, or is it just like a role? Like what do you like clarify your definition?
Identity, very good question. Yes, it is your value as a human being, right? So let's talk about that. When we come into this world, I think all of us can agree, if not, there's the door, that when babies come into this world, they're a 10 out of 10 on their worth, right? They are 10 out of 10 on their worth in this world. And at some point as we grow, as we self-assess our worth, that starts to tick down, right? But what happened? What happened is we took them on a variety of different roles. So even as a young child, we're told good friends, good playmates share, right? They're nice to each other, they do it to others. Good students raise their hand and participate in class and do all their homework, right? Good employees do everything that's asked of them, clarify, we have just a set of expectations of performance that are assigned to every single role that we take on in life, whether they're spoken or not. And then we spend our lives comparing ourselves and our performance to that expectation. And as that happens, our identity score starts to take a hit. Right? Our worth score starts to take a hit because they're combined. And why wouldn't they be? We're conditioned from a very young age that these things are one and the same. That's the messaging that we receive everywhere from birth. So you say that's fair? Yeah. It's weird though, right? How do we go from 10s to not being 10s? It's weird. So you're all probably wondering, like, okay, this is all great, this makes sense intellectually, but like, what do I do if I feel like an at leaster? What do I do about that? Right? So the first piece is understanding, being able to identify what the behaviors look like can I describe them for each one of these categories? So this is a sales example. I'm going to show you a real life example. But if I'm a salesperson, if I've got 1 month left to hit my goals, if I'm a winner, any ideas, what does a winner say to themselves?
I got this.
I'm going to work pretty hard and do everything. I have to be able to sleep at nights knowing that I did everything I could to try to hit that number. Right? What does an leaster say to themselves? I mean, at least I hit it last time. Were they going to fire me? Right? Well, you know, Rebecca's numbers are really low. At least I'm not as low as her. They'll fire her before they fire me, right? What does a non-winner say?
I'll never do it. I
Huh?
can't do it. I can't do
I
it.
can't do it. My boss's goals were really unreasonable, right? This is unreasonable. We had a disruption in the market. This is crazy. Nobody's gonna hit that, right? That's what a non-winner says to themselves. So the step one is being able to say, in this given situation, maybe I'm nervous about walking into a new situation. That could be a social situation, right? Can I identify what does a winner say and do in this scenario, even if I don't authentically feel it? Let's take a different example. Sign up with Alloy. I've never been a gym person, okay? There's like gym people and then there's regular people, and I'm not one of the gym people, right? What does a winner say, even if they're nervous? What would a winner say to themselves?
I'm gonna learn how to be a gym person.
That's right. Nobody was a gym person before they stepped into a gym, right? What about an at-leaster?
I don't have to sign a contract, so.
At least I can quit if it's not for me, right?
Maybe that's not winner.
What does a non-winner say?
No way.
This workout was really hard.
It's really hard. This wasn't for people like me. This was for fit people that are already fit. This is not for me, right? So step one is being able to identify, regardless of how I feel, if I'm in a situation that causes me anxiety, a situation that I have fear around, I use it with my kid all the time, right? What do we wish we felt? Can we identify it even if we don't? So hold on to that for a second. This is a thinking tool that we use. It's called the success triangle. And it's this idea that attitude, behavior, and technique all have to come together if I'm going to be successful at fill in the blank, anything. So let's say I wanted to run a 5K, which I don't think I've ever done that actually. Never run a 5K, but let's pretend I wanted to, right? Can I identify the attitude that I would need in order to be successful at running a 5K? So let's start with what's not helpful, okay? What's not helpful is that's for people who do this, who like played sports growing up, right? That's for people who are already exercisers, right? That's not for me. If that is my attitude, chances that I will follow through on the behavior very, very, very slim, right? Whether I believe it or not, I can identify the attitude I would need, which is, yes, I've never done it before, but I can also see on Facebook that Susie from high school, who I know is a couch potato just like me, she seems to have done it, right? I can find these Facebook groups of people who are couch to 5Kers who all seem to have done it, and some of them were less in shape than me. Right? So I'm going to look for evidence and beliefs that I can do this. Now, I want to be clear here because we're going to get to it. It doesn't matter if I feel it or not. It matters if I can identify it. Okay? Behavior. Can I map it out? Yes, I can print it off online. There's apps. I'm sure there's apps. Here's the race date. Back up. Here's all the behavior you need to do to get ready for that day. Fine. Got a map, got a plan, let's go. Technique. I've got to have good shoes. I've got to hydrate. I might need to see that. I've got to make sure I'm breathing properly, right? And so the idea is that if I want to be successful at running a 5K, I've got to map out all 3 of these points, because if any of them falls apart, I will make it. If I believe I can't, I won't. Plain and simple. Even if I believe I'm capable physically, and I know what the technique is, if I haven't run in years, and I don't do the practice runs, I just don't do the behavior, I will probably struggle tremendously, right? If I've got the right attitude, I did the practice runs, but on the day of I'm dehydrated, because I didn't hydrate, I'm still not going to be successful, right? So if I want to figure out how do I be successful at whatever it is, I can use this as a thinking tool. Now the glaring problem here is that I can't control the way that I feel, right? So I wish that I could tell you all, and there's a lot of through positive psychology out there that will tell you if you just pretend the world is great, it will be, right? But if you decide that if the world is rainbows and unicorns, then when your feet hit the ground in the morning, it will be. The problem is, I can't control the way that I feel. So what do I do about that? This image describes what happens to our beliefs and how they influence, how they can spiral either positively or negatively. So let's use the example. Let's say you have a friend or an acquaintance that you don't really like. No, let's use it like let's say they're like a colleague. Nobody has a colleague they don't like, I'm sure. But let's pretend you had a colleague you don't like, right? Then when they come in the morning and they walk past your desk and they sit down and they don't say hi, if my belief is this is a terrible person, my judgment when they walk by is, can you believe her? She can't say hi. So self-absorbed, right? If my belief is she's a terrible person, and she comes by my desk and says, hello, how are you? How was your evening? I'm like, she was so fake. Right? So whatever my belief is, my judgment comes out of that, right? Based on that judgment, I decide to either take specific actions or not take specific actions. So inaction is action here too, right? So maybe I just avoid building a relationship or even trying. Maybe I just do nothing, or maybe I make things worse, right? Through my interactions with this person. And the result I get is, guess what? Things are still bad. I've still got evidence. See, I told you she's a terrible person, right? I'll give you a real life example of how I saw this play out. This was a work example. There's a job I had where me and one other person, we were both in kind of different roles, different departments, but it was really important that we worked effectively together for the betterment of the organization. And from a personality standpoint, if any of you are familiar with like DISC personality assessments, this was long before I knew anything about them, but I know now, when I look back on it, that we were in wildly different corners of the map, right? So like we literally had nothing in common from a personality standpoint. I'm a task-oriented, outgoing person. She is a detail-oriented introvert, right? Opposite, have nothing in common. So task-oriented people, what they tend to do is they come in, when they come to work, and they sit down at their desk and they start working on the task. And once that is done, they will then socialize. At lunch or, breaks, things like that. People-oriented people, when they come in, they want to chit-chat, and if we don't do that, I'm not comfortable getting to the task because it doesn't feel like we're all in a safe space yet, right? We were in different worlds. So I would come in, not say hi, sit down, do my work, don't talk to anybody because I didn't know any better. And our relationship was always pretty strained. They just couldn't figure it out. We just didn't. You've had people in your life where you're like, I don't know what it is, or for whatever reason, we just don't click. There's all these like micro things that you pick up on, and like, we just don't click. It was like that. So finally, my beliefs hadn't changed, but I decided to change my actions. All I did, the only change I made, was I started going to her desk on my way to my desk and saying hello then instead of at lunch. I just moved the time slot. Nothing else. And our relationship got so much better.
You made it a task.
Yes, I sure did. I made it a task. So the thing is, we can't control our beliefs, right? We cannot control our fears, we cannot control our anxieties, the thoughts that float through our head are there, they are what they are. But what we can control is our actions. So the reason that it's important that I'm able to identify what would a winner do? A winner would, and whatever the answer to that question is, that's the action I've got to take, regardless of how I actually feel. Because what happens is when I take the action based on the belief I wish I had, instead of the belief I actually have, 10 out of 10 times I get new results. And when I get new results, I have authentic beliefs that I don't have to work so hard on anymore. Right? So let's say it's picking up a new exercise program, right? Like, this isn't for me, this is hard. Y'all know for me, I don't lift weights, I'm a cardio queen, right? You'll never see me on that bike. Like, I get plenty of that, right? It's not why I'm here. So my belief coming into this was, I'm not a weights person, but I also know that I should be, right? So if I were somebody who, I don't know, tried to take care of the whole body and not just the heart, what might I do, right? Well, I would probably sign up for something like alloy, so I'm going to do that regardless of how I feel, right? When I get new results and new beliefs, it's like, you know what, I kind of am. I did pretty well on that, right? I get new results and new authentic beliefs that reframe how I think of myself. So if we go back to identity versus role, right? All back to where we started. The thing here is that the glaring piece is, let's say I rated myself as a 7. How do I become a 10? I want to be a 10. Everybody wants to be a 10. And the way that I do that is I say, I'm feeling some head trash, some fear, some anxiety around this situation. And so I'm going to figure out what would an I-10 do. I'm going to do it. And then when I do it, what happens is my identity score grows over time. Right? So the way that we grow our eyesight is we decide that we're going to start acting like an I, like an I-10, regardless of how we feel. Identify what an I-10 would do it anyway, and our eyesight grows with it. Let me pause here. It's okay if there are none, but any questions or comments or feedback on this?
I feel like one thought that's coming up is like a 10 or a winner in that category is the difference of willing to get out of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And because all that you're saying is like, I might not believe that, but I can still, convince myself to take that action, which might not be an action I would have taken.
Mm-hmm.
But if I just do it anyway, and then the whole cycle changes. So it's like a willingness to get
Yes.
out of your comfort zone, build new habits,
Yes.
and all that. I think that's a difference maker.
Absolutely. And I'm headed there next.
Oh,
So you're just like 3 steps ahead of me. I love it. I love it. Anyone else? Yeah.
When I was thinking about, you were saying that if I want to be a weight trainer, then I need to act as if,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what I'm thinking or feeling.
Right.
I have to put those fears aside. But what I'm thinking is, in order to do that, do we not need incentive or motivation to move that dial, or to move the needle? I mean,
I
I'm
understand.
still fearful, so what
still
helps
fearful.
me overcome that?
Yes. I think it's a really good question. It's related to where you were headed. So can I come back to that? We're still fearful, and that's okay, right? I'm gonna hopefully put these pieces together. Let me give you some examples of head trash that we make reality as we go into this next piece. So for salespeople, this is a very common one. People only care about price. That's not true. The data are very clear that's not true. But as salespeople, we carry around this piece of head trash, right? Cardio is not for people like me. I can't use those bigger weights, right? It's not for people like me. I'm not a good networker. It's not who I am. I'm not going to get that job, so I shouldn't even apply. Or should I even try? I reached out to our back office team and said, I would love to know some head trash that you use this structure with in your own lives. And this is what they gave me. I already screwed up my nutrition plan today. I did not write this. Our back office team at Sandler did, okay? There's no need to make healthy choices the rest of the day, right? I'm not gonna fit in with the people in this class, or at this dinner, or at this party, right? I'm not gonna fit in with them, they already know each other. I don't wanna look dumb by asking questions, so I'll just stay quiet, right? I'm afraid of failing, so I might as I'll not even try. This idea of separating identity from role and deciding what are my beliefs and what action do I want to take instead of it. This structure, this process works for any number of head trash flavors that you can imagine, right? And I know that all of us have it. I have head trash. What's important is that I'm able to label it as head trash and say, yeah, I hear you. I've done cognitive behavioral therapy. I don't know if any of you have, but I spent some time at, when I was in grad school, there was a anxiety disorders clinic on campus. I did 6 months of cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's the same thing. What they teach you is, it's like this little voice, this like little creature sitting on your shoulder, right? And it's gonna show up like unpredictably, probably for the rest of your life. It's gonna sit there and it's gonna talk in your ear, and it's gonna cause your heart to start beating faster, and it's gonna cause you to be nervous and have thoughts that are irrational about how big of a problem something really is or not, right? It's not going anywhere. What matters is, can you identify it as this external thing? Can you say, I see you, I'm labeling you as head trash. They didn't use that word. Thank you for visiting. Feel the fear and do it anyway, right? That's what matters. It's the same thing that they teach. So here's the thing about confidence and that motivation, right? There are a few, I think oftentimes what we're talking about is when somebody has, we call it gravitas. They're charismatic, they're confident, they're gifted, they seem to be good at whatever they put their mind to, right? These are the confident people that we know in our lives. Even regardless of their role, if they're in a group talking, when they talk, everybody listens. They don't interject, they get quiet. It has less to do with like their power and more to do with just the presence that that person has. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So there's a word for that, and it's gravitas. It's that like je ne sais quoi that people have, right? And unfortunately, when we're able to identify that in other people, there are a few myths that surround the way that we think about that. This first one is that gravitas is a gift, that you're either born with it or you're not. That confident people were born confident. There's also a myth in our sales profession that some people are just, they were born salespeople. They have what it takes. Salespeople are trained, they're not born. In fact, those born salespeople, the really outgoing ones, are usually not great salespeople actually, until they've been well trained. They talk too much. So, the myth of the gravitas gift, and this is all, this Dr. Rebecca Newton does a lot of work on this, so I highly recommend if you want more of this, is this false belief, this head trash, that people, when we see them being confident, that that's just how they were made. They have that gift, I don't have that gift, right? The reality is, and I'm using Beyonce here, because, why not? Any excuse to use Beyonce on the slide. Beyonce, arguably, I mean, look at that face. An incredibly confident human being. If you've seen any of her videos from the Renaissance tour, like, she is 100 out of 10 on the confidence scale, right? The thing about Beyonce, and some of you may know this, is that Beyonce was not always confident. And she's public about it. She talks about it. That's how we know this, right? She grew up singing in the church. She grew up in a very conservative family, and so when she was younger and started to sing pop music and perform, she was asked to wear costumes and move her body in ways that was very uncomfortable to her. And so the way that she got through it, she said, she created an alter ego named Sasha Fierce. She later produced an album called I Am Sasha Fierce, which was her declaring to the world, I have become that person, right? So Beyonce, the way that she managed her own fears about her performance is that Beyonce Knowles was incapable of standing up on a stage and doing what we know Beyonce to do today. But Sasha Fierce could do it. So every time she went out on stage, she embodied Sasha Fierce. And this is a technique that we teach salespeople. It's called the alter ego effect. If you want more, read that book. It's unnecessarily long, but it's really good. A lot of the world's most, quote, confident people have alter egos. Bo Jackson, his alter ego was Jason from the movies, you know. He's famous for saying, Bo never played a game of his life. The reason was, Bo Jackson as a person was not ruthless enough to slaughter the competition. He felt bad about it. Emotionally, he held back. So he adopted an alter ego that wouldn't hold back. Jason, you all know who Bo Jackson is, right? Beyonce has Sasha Fierce. David Bowie had an alter ego named Ziggy Stardust, right? But I want to be clear here. The idea is not that we fake it till we make it, because what that implies is that there is something inauthentic about it. That Sasha Fierce and Beyonce are not the same person. And that's not actually true. What we're looking to do instead is to tap in to a piece of ourselves that exists, but our fears and our anxieties hold us back from actually showing up in the world as that person or in that role. So I don't like fake it till you make it, because it implies that that's not really us. Right? The reason that Beyonce had the album I Am Sasha Fierce is because she practiced enough being Sasha Fierce that eventually that is who she is. Right? There's two more myths, and then I'll get y'all out of here. The second one is this myth of confidence. That people with authentic gravitas are always confident. And the data are really clear that that's absolutely not the case. The difference between people who, by our observation, we look at them and we're like, that's a confident person. The only difference between people who we can say that about and others and ourselves is that people who appear to be confident are choosing day to day that they're going to show up and act confident regardless of how they feel. But they're not choosing confidence. What they're choosing is courage. So if you dig into the data about people like Beyonce, right? They're actually terrified sometimes when they show up. But they put on their alter ego, and they show up anyway. It's about choosing courage over confidence. And this is very closely related to motivation. This is a problem in the fitness industry, right? And I feel like people who go all the time are just motivated. They're self-motivated to go. They're not, right? They're not. I've been a fitness instructor since 2002, teaching cycle bar, all the time. But the reason that I teach spin class instead of just be a rider, you know what? Because at halftime I'm getting okay. I have to. I do not have a choice. I take it off the table. I'm tired. I've worked all week. I want to be with my kid, right? Now I'm always glad that I'm there as soon as I'm there. But I've had to put structures in place that allow me to not have to lean on motivation. Because motivation is fleeting. Confidence is fleeting. They cannot be relied upon. I can choose courage. I can choose to show up even if I don't feel like it. I cannot choose whether or not I feel confident or whether or not I feel motivated. So it's coming back to what you're saying, right? I have put structures in place to make sure that I show up. Same with alloy. The price point keeps me showing up, right? I think that's a good thing. I don't just say, I don't feel like it today because I don't want to waste my money, right? It kicks me in the butt. It's like, go anyway, right? So this myth of confidence, and this is where cross-train your confidence comes in. Has anybody seen the show on Netflix? It's really good. Mind Your Manners. So this lady, Sarah Jane Ho, she is in Hong Kong, and she runs like a manners school. Have you seen it? Oh, she runs like a manners school. She calls it a manners school, but really it's a confidence school. It's very fun to watch. So people come to her, maybe they're having to go to social events of people who are much wealthier, and they're just really uncomfortable with how they're showing up at these events, using the utensils correct, there's that stuff, right? But there's also people who are trying to get back into the dating world or get back into the working world after a divorce, right? They are there with her because they are looking to build their confidence to enter something that feels really unnatural and otherworldly to them. And what I've noticed is that in every single episode, Sarah Jane has them do something that appears to be completely unrelated to the job at hand. So maybe I'm there because I've got to re-enter the workforce and I'm looking to like get my head straight for this, and she'll send them to a kung fu class. And every single time before they go in, they're like, why am I here? Why am I here? This makes no sense. I don't want to do this. Why are you making me do this? And then they come out and they say, I get it. Because every time we have opportunities to show up anyway, to say, I didn't think I could do that, but I did it, our eyesight grows. And every time our eyesight grows, because we perform in a manner that we view ourselves, right? When my eyesight grows by doing things that are cross-training what I'm really trying to do, here's the whole point of the talk, right? Maybe I want to be better in social situations. Maybe I want to be a better performer at work. Maybe I want to be, whatever it is, right? Every time I have an opportunity to identify what would a winner do and do it, my eyesight grows and my ability and my confidence and that muscle memory of I do what I wish I did, everything else grows, right? So this is why she does that. This is me, I just have to show you this. This is me ballroom dancing, it's one of my hobbies, right? I came in knowing absolutely nothing, right? And what I've noticed is that a lot of the people at the studio are professionals at the top of their game. They're people who are experts in what it is that they do, just like I am, right? And they are all there because they desperately want to be a beginner. They're there because they want to have that experience of learning something, doing like completely screwing it up, being a beginner, being able to practice something, and the incredible, what's the word I'm looking for? Sense of accomplishment that we get from trying something new and then being able to master it helps us in everything in life. The last thing I'll share here with you is the myth of charisma. So, everybody, you agree Oprah's super charismatic, super charismatic, right? I'll agree on that. Yes, she is. But the myth is that people who have this charisma think that way, just like we think that about confident people. But Oprah's real gift, if you watch her interviews, there's a point in a lot of them where she'll reach over and she'll like hold the hands of the person she's talking to and she'll look them in the eye. And her gift, yes, she's charismatic, all of that, but her gift is connection. She makes everybody that she talks to feel like they are the only person in the world. And I'm not suggesting like, oh, I'm doing this and everybody needs me, right? But if I decided I was a charismatic person, right, what would I do? I would look for connection over charisma. I would decide that I'm going to show up curious, genuinely interested in what you have to say, right? If I decided that that was my intent, what comes across is you think I'm charismatic, right? But really what I've done is I've decided I'm going to get curious, I'm going to try to connect, I'm going to ask questions, and I'm going to show you that I care about you, and then you leave there thinking, oh, she's charismatic. Right? No, I just chose how I wanted to show up. So, gravitas, confidence, it's about being more interested than interesting. It's about feeling the fear and doing it anyway, where we spent the first half of our session today, right? And it's about seeking to understand. And can actually give me a crap. These are things that we can control, right? These are the actions, this is the action part of it. I can control these things more than I can control does somebody think I'm confident. Okay, I took y'all right up to 4 o'clock. Comments, questions? Yeah? Tony, what do you think? I can see you smiling.
It's cool to see you in your own.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I like reading things like this, but a lot of this is new. Like I wrote down Dr. Nathan's name. I've never read any of her work, and I just love seeing. Like I get to work out with you, and I've seen you at Cycle Bar, but it's really fun seeing your professional. And I like that's something.
Thank you.
You did a great job.
Thanks. You're a salesperson. What are you thinking?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's funny that you brought up salespeople, like the myth of salespeople are this type of personality. It's something that we talked about on one of our calls. I think we had like an icebreaker question, and it was like, what do you feel about one of our values? It was like, pick a value, what do you think about it? And so one of ours at Play is, you know, basically just be authentically who you are. And that always stuck out to me because and this is like long-winded, so I'm sorry. But my past with Play has been primarily operations. So on the sales side, I'm actually pretty new, like a year and a half or so. And so I've been like behind the scenes doing all that fun stuff, like not out connecting, not being forward facing. So when I switched over, you see all of our, you know, the other sales team, and they are very much like a happy-go-lucky and different type of personality, and I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely more of like a sit back, soak it all in, and then like let's talk type of person. So it was discouraging at first. I'm like, I don't think I can do this. Like I don't know how to do this.
Yep.
I can't be that, and I don't want to be that because that's not me. So I think all this to say is that that's something that sat with me is that you don't have to be one particular personality, and this is like across the board. Just be authentically you and you'll be then comfortable, and then as long as you're courageous to step out of that and expand who you authentically are, then you can grow. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah. Actually, the highest performing salespeople, if you look at like the histogram, are not the outgoing, gregarious folks. Because like I said, they talk too much.
Yeah.
They talk themselves out of a sale. They don't listen enough to the
Yeah.
more interested than interesting. They're not very good at that.
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, just even your like, just from listening to you and how you were talking right now and stuff, from not being in sales at all, I'm in the medical field, like, I'd much rather talk to somebody like you piqued my interest, rather than when somebody is all uppity and da-da-da, I'm like, oh God, what are you trying to sell me today? You know, I'm like, get the hell out of my face.
Yeah.
You know? So, I want a real person. I want somebody to be their authentic self. Let's be humans. You know, I want you to help me, and I want me to help you.
Yeah.
So.
I know you have to get set up, but I will stick around over here if somebody wants to talk.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.